Today wasn't just White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at the White House briefing. None other than J.D. Vance joined her. And frankly, the two of them lied through their teeth on some really important issues that people care about. So I'm going to take a crack at some of the questions and try to set the record straight. Okay, first question goes to Washington Bureau Chief for Breitbart News, Matt Boyle. Why not?
There's two key Democrat lies I would like to get your take on and see if you can address. The first is that you're seeing a number of top Democrat leaders, from Kamala Harris to Chuck Schumer to Hakeem Jeffries, claim that it is a Republican shutdown caused by Trump.
Always good to open your totally unbiased question there, Matt, by saying there are, quote, two key Democrat lies. Okay, regardless, I will answer that. Here's the thing. Republicans control both the House and Senate, as well as the White House. They may have more power than you might think, Matt, and a lot of other people in the room might not think either. Funding the government does require 60 votes in the Senate. Republicans have 53 votes, and they could not get 7 Democrats to join them in supporting a bill that does not extend health care subsidies to tens of millions of Americans. That's the issue, Matt. And you would think that someone who thought he was as smart about politics as Donald Trump would see how unpopular it is to make health care more expensive. But here we are. Okay, Mr. Boyle wasn't done with his question, so let me just let him finish. He said he had 2 Democrat lies, after all.
They're out there now claiming that they don't want to give health care to illegal aliens. Can you address both of those lies from the Democrat Party?
Okay, so Senator Warren touched on this, but the completely misleading Republican talking point right now, the party explanation for why they are refusing to compromise with Democrats and fund the government, is that Democrats are trying to fund health care for undocumented immigrants. Now, here's how the New York Times put that claim. Quote, they said, Republicans have been falsely asserting that Democrats are shutting down the government to fund free health care for unauthorized immigrants. In reality, unauthorized immigrants are largely barred from federally funded health care programs. The Democrats' budget proposal does not make them eligible for those programs. The truth is the health care that Democrats are trying to get funded is not for undocumented immigrants at all. It is for tens of millions of American citizens. And we've talked about this subsidy, but I'm just going to repeat some of it or reiterate some of it. I mean, back in 2021, the Biden administration passed a bill that expanded access to health care plans under the ACA, provided tax credits to make health care premiums more affordable. And right now, 22 million Americans rely on those subsidies, but they are set to disappear at the end of the year if Congress doesn't act. That would mean monthly health insurance premiums more than doubling in costs for millions of Americans, and an estimated 4 million Americans losing their health insurance altogether. That's the holdup. That's why the government shut down. Democrats want to extend the enhanced tax credits for the Affordable Care Act, and Republicans don't. It has nothing to do with immigrants. Okay, Shamna Krish from the New York Times. Go ahead.
How did the White House decide that it is appropriate for Jared Kushner to be working on matters that involve Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, 3 countries that combined have given him more than $2.5 billion for his investment firm?
Now, I don't normally show Caroline Leavitt's responses to these briefing questions, important so I can answer more questions, but this is a response you should really see, so we're going to play this one.
I think it's, frankly, despicable that you're trying to suggest that it's inappropriate. Jared is donating his energy and his time to our government, to the president of the United States, to secure world peace.
I mean, okay. I don't know how Caroline thinks donating your time works, but typically donated time doesn't not come with financial returns, like huge ones. I mean, just this Monday, we learned that Jared Kushner's private equity firm has teamed up with Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund for the largest private equity buyout ever, buying the video game company EA Games for $55 billion. That, of course, comes on top of the $2 billion Saudi Arabia has already invested in Kushner's private equity fund and the $1.5 billion Kushner got from the UAE and Qatar late last year. But how dare reporters suggest that it's inappropriate for Jared to be involved in White House discussions impacting those countries? What an outrageous question. His company is only getting literally billions of dollars from them. Meanwhile, Republicans are so unwilling to shell out for the health care of millions of Americans, they're shutting the government down.
It is time for tonight's Money Power Politics. Today, Paramount officially launched a hostile takeover bid for Warner Brothers Discovery, despite its deal that we learned about last week with Netflix. And buried in the fine print, the deal is backed by a private equity firm founded by none other than Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as well as a huge investment from sovereign wealth funds from Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar. Amazing. Paramount didn't lead with that. So let's level set here. In the last year, Paramount merged with Skydance, giving the Ellison family control over CBS News. Kushner, with the help from Saudi Arabia, took video game giant Electronic Arts private in the largest leverage buyout ever. And to top it all off, the Ellisons, who are major Trump supporters, agreed to play a key role in TikTok's U.S. operations. That is an enormous amount of influence over media. And if their bid with Warner Brothers Discovery is successful, it is only going to get much, much bigger. My dear friend David Gura joins me now. He's a correspondent for Bloomberg and host of the Big Take podcast, and Oliver Darcy, co-founder of Status. Olivier, let us start with you. Netflix's offer does not include CNN, but Paramount has expressed interest. What would that mean if the Ellison family acquires yet another news organization?
Well, Stephanie, this is one of the most dramatic, I think, fights for a Hollywood studio we've ever seen. But like you say, at stake is a lot more than Warner Brothers Pictures, which alone would be huge if the Ellisons were to get their hands on that, given how it can shape culture and the entertainment industry. But inside WBD is CNN. It's one of the assets that they are trying to acquire. And I think that's a particular interest in this fight, because Donald Trump cares very much about CNN and the ownership of CNN, the editorial programming on CNN. And when you come and look at this deal, the regulatory issues are really a wild card here. And if someone can convince Donald Trump, let's say David Ellison convinces Donald Trump that under us, CNN is going to be a lot more favorable to you, that will give the Ellisons a possible edge in getting a deal done. And so I think that's what's interesting about this deal and this whole thing is CNN is a small business component in this deal, but it is outsized in the regulatory influence it's going to have over a deal like this.
Then that's the question, right? Paramount is arguing that their all-cash offer is going to face fewer regulatory hurdles than Netflix. Is that because it's all cash? Or is it because of the influence, or is it because of the influence that the Ellison family has over this White House, or the fact that Netflix is already so big in streaming, they're going to face hurdles? What's the real reason this thing should have an easier time going through?
I think it's a combination of those things. The number one streamer buying the number three streamer is obviously a regulatory issue. And, normally that would be looked at, and it's hard to imagine how that would go through. But it's also that the Ellisons have fostered this relationship with Donald Trump. They've kissed up to him. They've bent the knee. You've seen what they've done at CBS and CBS News, for instance. They installed the ombudsman, who is very pro-Trump. They installed Barry Weiss as editor-in-chief, who has been pushing the network, I'd say, in waters that are more favorable to Donald Trump. And so it's pretty obvious that they thought that with Donald Trump as an ally, they could push this deal through. David Ellison even said today on CNBC, it was actually quite a remarkable admission, that he's talked to Donald Trump about CNN. And it's not a secret as to what that conversation would probably look like. Donald Trump has not liked CNN for the last decade since he's been in politics. He obviously wants the network's tone to change. And so I imagine that, if David Ellison gets CNN, there's an understanding that he's going to push that network in a direction that's going to be more favorable to Donald Trump. And so when you look at the regulatory issues, certainly Netflix has issues, given that it is the dominant streamer, and that would be looked at regardless. But also, I think the Ellisons were banking on the fact that they thought that they could get this deal through because of their relationship with Donald Trump.
But it is not all about the Ellisons, David, and that's what's important here. Yes, they're putting up $12 billion in financing, but you really had to dig to find out that Jared Kushner was involved in this bid. His name is not even mentioned until page 44 of a 58-page SEC filing, and $24 billion in financing is coming from Middle East sovereign wealth funds. That was definitely not in the Paramount header or headline, hey, this is Saudi backed.
Not at the top of the release, no. So it's buried in there, and I think you look at the deal and the way that that's proposed or the way that it's structured, and they've done it in a way that there wouldn't have to be a CFIUS review. The way these Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds have said they'll participate in this is they don't want any director seats on the board of this company. They're trying to navigate this in a kind of creative way. Just picking up on what Oliver said just a moment ago, we talk about this in a regulatory sense, talk about regulatory hurdles. As you level set, we should level set about the fact that none of this is normal, and there is so much acquiescence and bowing to Donald Trump. He is the chief regulator here. So Bloomberg reporting today that at the Kennedy Center Honors last night, there in David Ellison's box was Brendan Carr, the head of the FCC. He spent some time talking to President Trump at that event as well. Bloomberg also reported that Ted Sarandos had gone to the White House to meet with President Trump as well. So we're seeing this kind of one-on-one, individualized diplomacy, again, with the chief regulator, that being Donald Trump. So it's being highly personalized. And the addition of Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, with whom the president says he has this kind of professional remove. Jared's doing his thing, except when he's doing something for him, when he's going to Russia or he's going to the Middle East. It's entirely confusing. The lines are really blurred here. And I think that's why they buried it on page 44.
Well, the president has said that he has not spoken directly to Jared Kushner about the merger's approval process. Watch this.
Should they be allowed to buy Warner Brothers? Should Netflix?
Well, that's the question. They have a very big market share. And when they have Warner Brothers, that share goes up a lot. So I don't know. That's going to be for some economists to tell. And also, and I'll be involved in that decision, too. It is a big market share. There's no question about it. It could be a problem.
Okay, David, this is not something presidents are usually involved with, but Gary Kasparov wrote earlier today. He's obviously an anti-Putin activist, but he wrote, if you recall my Putinization checklist, getting media companies into the hands of leaders' friends and family is quite high. How alarming is this?
It's alarming to a lot of people. I mean, Gary Kasparov talks a lot about that playbook, and this is an example of what happened in Russia. It's happened in other authoritarian countries as well. I think people have reason to worry about how this is all playing out. In light of what Oliver said just a few moments ago, we've seen sort of telegraphed by David Ellison his vision for what Paramount is going to be. I think we spent the bulk of the weekend thinking about the complementarity of Netflix and Warner Brothers. Now we're doing the same thing with Warner Brothers and Paramount. And I think that it's not difficult to go down a path where you see them wielding a lot of control over what is effectively one of the big major news organizations in this country, all the while they have one. I mean, they have CBS already. So it's not only assuming control, but assuming control of multiple entities.
Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar would now have a lot of influence, Oliver, over U.S. media. What would that mean? How vulnerable does that leave us? Why would they want it?
Well, I think they want to draw tourism to Saudi Arabia. And if you can have, the Warner Brothers Discovery assets shining light on your, on tourism there, I think that would be a positive. I think they would love, for instance, White Lotus to be shot in Saudi Arabia. That might get some people heading over to Saudi Arabia and thinking maybe we should go on vacation there, right? I'm sure they would love CNN to maybe be more fair in their coverage of Saudi Arabia or the UAE or Qatar. And so there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of soft power at play here. They might not get those board seats so they can avoid that CFIUS review, but I think they're not handing over billions of dollars for nothing. They want that soft influence, and their main goal right now is attracting U.S. dollars in the Middle East. There's no better way to do that than by having someone like Tom Cruise shooting the next Mission Impossible in your major city and showing everyone that, look, this is actually a good place. You should be investing your money here.
Meanwhile, the president wants CBS to issue him a formal apology because he didn't like an interview that was conducted with Marjorie Taylor Greene on 60 Minutes last night. That is happening in 2025 in the United States of America. Please pay attention.
For more than a week now, we have been following the story of an anonymous whistleblower from the intelligence community who alleges that Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, spiked a former whistleblower report they filed last year. And a whistleblower report about someone close to Donald Trump. Okay, so that's what we knew. That's already kind of edgy. I've been obsessed with the story. And then today we learned that that person close to Donald Trump is none other than Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. As the Wall Street Journal described it today, the report centers around a conversation between two foreign nationals last year discussing Jared Kushner and reportedly Iran. Beyond that, we have no idea what the content of that conversation was, though a senior U.S. official tells MS Now that the discussion about Kushner was just, quote, salacious gossip. Okay, we'll see when we learn more. But the whistleblower alleges that Gabbard limited the sharing of that content for political purposes, an allegation Gabbard fiercely denies, and which her spokeswoman claims is baseless and politically motivated. Okay. Now, the whistleblower also alleges that the NSA's general counsel's office failed to report a, quote, potential crime to the Justice Department that was raised by the content of the conversation. I mean, those are some freaking serious allegations, just to state it. We don't know what's in there, but those are serious allegations. But I'm going to zoom out for a second, because part of what is amazing about this story is the idea that there could still be another shoe left to drop. When it comes to our understanding of Jared Kushner and his role in U.S. diplomacy, I mean, let's just take stock in what we already know just from public reporting. Just days after leaving the White House, Kushner started a brand new venture capital firm, and despite having no experience at all, somehow managed to get a $2 billion investment from a fund led by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. In the 3 years after that investment, Kushner's firm got paid at least $112 million in fees from investors, while not giving those investors any profits in return. But somehow, even after that track record was made public, in 2024, Kushner's firm managed to score another $1.5 billion investment from funds tied to the governments of the UAE and Qatar. Now, Kushner's firm, Affinity Partners, says that everything is on the up and by the book. Of course, that's what they say. But even Kushner himself does not shy away from saying what makes his firm such a unique and attractive investment.
What would you say the biggest differentiator is for Affinity compared to other growth funds?
We're able to do things on the geopolitical side, on the connection side, on the problem-solving side that I think that they've found very valuable as well.
On the connection side, there's lots in there. Now, while Kushner's firm is raking in all of that cash, multiple billions of dollars from Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds alone, Kushner's also simultaneously serving as a quote-unquote volunteer for the Trump administration, as an off-the-books foreign diplomat of sorts. Nothing shady about that at all. I mean, he's negotiated ceasefires in Gaza. He's met with Putin to discuss Ukraine. Here he was just last week trying to negotiate a new nuclear deal with Iran. Given how much money Kushner is receiving from countries with a lot at stake in those negotiations, that feels like quite a conflict of interest. And all of that is already public knowledge. That's all public. So given all of that, what could possibly be in this whistleblower report that could make all of that look any worse? And how can that whistleblower make what they know public? I have the perfect person to ask. Joining me now is Andrew Buckeye, the chief legal counsel at Whistleblower Aid and the attorney for the whistleblower at the heart of this story. First of all, you are doing such incredible work right now. We wouldn't know so much of what we know about this government without whistleblowers. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And it's not just me. It's my team at whistleblower.aid.org.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me start with this. Tulsi Gabbard has defended her decision to not share your client's report with Congress by saying that her office's inspector general deemed the content of the report not to be credible. That's her argument. That's what others have echoed. What do you make of that defense?
First of all, that credibility determination has no bearing on our client's right to take this to Congress. By law, one, that disclosure and its contents should be sent to the Senate and House Intelligence Committees, and two, our client should be able to and must be able to, by law, meet with those members. Second, the issue of credibility. It's been kind of bothering me for quite some time because whenever somebody thinks about credibility, they're questioning, is somebody credible? Can you trust this particular individual? In this particular case, what the ICIG or the DNI is looking at is saying, well, because the whistleblower read something in a report or was part of a meeting, and perhaps Tulsi Gabbard herself said, well, I didn't do X because she's first person. Her word is taken over somebody else's. In my opinion, that's a questionable way to define or figure out credibility.
I've seen Senator Mark Warner, I've talked to him about this, and Jim Himes and others basically say, we can't make any assessment because it's so redacted. That sounds familiar. Why can't your client just give them an unredacted report?
So the first thing, just stepping back for a moment, the reason why the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act exists is because members of the intelligence community can't just go to the Hill and go to the intelligence committees and provide them classified information. Why? Well, even though all the staff and senators may have security clearances, they may not be read into the specific issues at hand.
And a need to know.
And a need to know. So in this particular case, as it's become public, from what I understand, this would involve the Gang of Eight. So had our client done that, that would have been the mishandling of classified information. Our client did everything right from the get-go. Even before retaining me and retaining whistleblower8.org, they went to the IG's office. There's also another thing that the IG mentioned, I think, in his statement from last week, which is that there was a lot of classified information. Maybe this was the general counsel. There was a lot of classified information that was put into the intake form. That's not true.
Oh, that's false.
That's false. The intake form was only 1 page. There are subsequent meetings that a whistleblower can have with the IG's office where they're actually providing evidence, going into the details. So the other thing is we actually don't know what the Hill received, what Senator Warner has received. It's heavily redacted. And is it just that cover memo? Because if that's the case, and it's not including the supplemental evidence.
Let me ask you about the timeline, because you just referenced this. And last year, around the same time that your client filed this formal whistleblower report, the Washington Post reported that Tulsi Gabbard had installed someone inside the Inspector General's office that reported directly to her, which sounds incredibly shady to me. Just help us understand the timeline of your client's complaint when they went to the IG's office and how it relates or could relate, I guess, to Gabbard reshaping her agency. Her agency's Inspector General's office.
Oh, absolutely. This raises a lot of questions. So first, the whistleblower first reached out to the Intelligence Committee IG's office back in mid-April of last year. You know, you can pick up the phone, initiate contact and whatnot. And that was in mid-April. On May 9th, Dennis Kirk, this person who works for Tulsi Gabbard, she put him into the IG's office. Why? Is it to monitor what's incoming? We don't know.
So before, he had already gone to the IG's office, and then she put her person in there after that.
No, so the whistleblower, he or she, they contacted the IG's office.
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard reportedly, according to this Washington Post article, put somebody in there.
Yeah.
And then the complaint, the disclosure by the whistleblower was filed on May 21st. So the timeline is questionable. And then the fact that there is a debate about whether or not the acting Inspector General at the time reversed decisions or not, there's just a lot of questions that I have about what did or did not happen here.
We don't have much time left. I could talk to you forever, but they also, the New York Times also reported that while Gabbard was restricting your client's report from getting to Congress, she was providing, Tulsi Gabbard, information, the report to Susie Wiles, which also is out of process here. But why is that hugely problematic?
Well, the question is, does Susie Wiles even have the security clearance to see that? One of the things I just want to really hone in on here is that the underlying disclosure was about Tulsi Gabbard blocking intelligence from being distributed within the intelligence community. So I have here my copy of the 9/11 Commission report. One of the recommendations of the 9/11 Commission report was to ensure that the intelligence community and law enforcement shares highly sensitive and classified information to try and prevent tragedies from happening. Here we have the Director of National Intelligence, her office was created because of this, going in and preventing the distribution of that intelligence. And the question is, why is that?
Andrew Buckeye, I have so many more questions. I hope you come back and keep talking to us as this story develops. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
In tonight's primetime focus, the swamp Trump built.
We have people that are selling this country down the drain.
Together we will drain the Washington swamp, and we will clean up the corruption in our nation's capital.
That montage started and ended with two events organized by the same company. Both Trump's 2015 kickoff event and the rally on January 6th were organized by Event Strategies Incorporated. They've quietly and seamlessly transitioned from staging Trump's political events to becoming the government's highest paid event contractor. You've probably seen the events they've planned, like when Trump cosplayed as a McDonald's drive-thru worker, or the kickoff for Trump accounts attended by MAGA's favorite rapper, Nicki Minaj. Even Trump properties are involved. Later this year, he's hosting a massive international economic event at his own golf resort, which is less like draining the swamp and more like building a water feature for it. But that alone wouldn't necessarily make this an example of a swamp. Companies get government contracts all the time. Event Strategies told the New York Times they got the contracts through legal loopholes, meaning no competition with other companies that also wanted the contracts. But we must note that Treasury and the Navy said they were operating on a short timeline, and the White House says it wasn't involved in the contracts. However, the swamp Trump built goes much farther than just event planning. Take Jared Kushner, the businessman whose light, unofficial portfolio includes easy assignments such as ending the horror in Gaza, the Ukraine war, and waging the Iran war. and now raising billions of dollars for his investment firm from the same governments he's currently negotiating with on behalf of our government. And look, maybe it's all above ground and it's all fine. Maybe it's totally normal for the president's son-in-law to negotiate peace in the Middle East while also asking Middle East players critical to achieving said peace for $5 billion. Or maybe, just maybe, when Donald Trump promised to drain the swamp, he didn't really mean it. And joining us to break it down is Rob Copeland, a finance reporter for the New York Times. He's one of the bylines on the investigative piece about Jared Kushner's fundraising effort. So, Rob, talk to us about what you've unearthed in investigating Jared Kushner and his very complex role in the Middle East, both publicly and privately, on behalf of the U.S. government and his own vested business interest.
Sure. So I was very surprised by this because, Jared Kushner had an official role in the first Trump administration, but afterwards he said he wasn't going back to government. He was going to run this private equity firm, Affinity Partners, and that it was going to be just totally above board. So I was surprised to hear from people in the last few months that he's been out there raising more money for his private equity firm at the same time as he has this sort of pseudo-government job as the so-called peace envoy for the Trump administration.
So if he were an official government employee, would he be restricted from doing this kind of business abroad? Would there be different disclosure requirements? Like, to what extent does his unofficial status enable him to do things, to engage in business that might not otherwise be allowed?
So this is sort of the $5 billion question right now, right? It's, if you say he has an unofficial job and he's a volunteer, it's true he is unpaid, he doesn't necessarily have to disclose the things that even, say, Secretary Lutnick has to do. The problem is he has a job that President Trump calls envoy, and he is literally negotiating for the American people. Even Jared Kushner would say that. So it's really a question that's being debated now is, should he have to disclose this? Should he be permitted to do it?
Well, it's not just about disclosure, right? I mean, would he be allowed to even be simultaneously conducting business? Like, can Howard Lutnick be engaging in these kinds of deals as as Commerce Secretary?
Well, who's stopping him? Exactly. The people who would be in charge of enforcing this would be the executive branch right now, and they haven't shown that that's something they are interested in.
Well, the other piece of the who's stopping them question seems to just be sort of public reaction and public revulsion. I mean, you would think after years of the swamp, as Elise just spelled out, being so much of the political narrative that the president came into office on, that the public would care about these things, be watching them very closely. Disgusted then when it turned out the swamp wasn't really actually being drained. It just seems like there are some new players getting to take advantage of it. Why do you think they're able to do some of this stuff just so out in the open and not really suffer any kind of political, if not legal and others kind of ramifications, even just any kind of personal and political payback for it?
Well, I think what's super interesting is that even 2 years ago, Jared did interviews about this firm, and he said, "I will not raise money during my father-in-law's second term." So even over the past 2 years, it's changed so much. And when I was speaking to people for this story, they really have mixed feelings, because there are a lot of people who agree with what Jared is doing in the Middle East, who think he's doing a good job. People can think he's doing a bad job. It's a free country. Pretty much everyone could not believe that he was actually trying to raise money from, say, Saudi Arabia, while he is literally negotiating with Saudi Arabia on behalf of the U.S. government.
Did you get a sense from your reporting that the officials or the individuals that he's raising money from understand this loophole and perhaps with that want to have leverage with the president's son-in-law? I mean, could it be from their vantage point, they're not looking at Affinity Partners and say, like, hey, this is an amazing private equity firm that's like just crushing it. We want to, we want to get in on a ground level. I mean, I think that
Jared Kushner has famously made like one of the worst real estate investments in American history, but yes.
Yes, I mean, I'm trying to put myself in their shoes and saying, like, why is a young unestablished private equity fundraiser coming to you and asking for billions of dollars, and you're like, well, I'm going to give you a lot of money for somebody who's completely untested and unproven so far.
Well, I don't think anyone believes that he's raising money for Affinity Partners, which happens to be run by Jared Kushner. I think that's a connection people can make. And in the case of, say, Saudi Arabia, that's a sovereign wealth fund that's controlled by the Crown Prince.
Right.
I mean, I'm not doing anything unfair by pointing that out. What I would say, though, is there are a lot of Trump administration figures who are doing that. I mean, Donald Trump Jr., he's not an official government player. Steve Mnuchin, the former Treasury Secretary, they're all out there in the Middle East, trying to raise money.
So if this is we're not saying there is a quid pro quo,
right.
But what would...
I mean, they're not naive. I just think like the leaders of the Gulf, and I think the people in the region who understand who Jared Kushner is and know what kind of access he has to the White House, they may not be asking for something, but they definitely know that if
Well, what I was going to say was, what would they be asking for?
Right.
Do we know what they might be wanting in exchange for, again, not a quid and not a quo, but like what might they be asking for? Because, to your point, they understand that this relationship is valuable.
Well, it's a hard question to answer because Jared he's in virtually every foreign policy decision in this administration. And I will say, we should be fair to him. He did produce non-zero returns in this fund since 2021. So it's up 25% after fees. You'd be better off in the NASDAQ and the S&P and a lot of other things. But he is producing investment returns, so he does have that argument going for him.
I'm glad you put that in perspective. I'm glad that you said that contextually, which is like you could have put your money in the NASDAQ and S&P 500 and you would have gotten better returns.
How is he doing on bringing peace to the Middle East?
I would not be the person to put a number on that.
Scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah, net of fees. Yeah.
Got you. Rob Copeland, so good to
Thanks,
have
Rob.
you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
According to Donald Trump and what he's been saying today, this war is just about over.
Is this war over?
I think it's close to over, yeah. I mean, I view it as very close to over. They have nothing left. They're going to make a deal.
Now, look, that would be great news if true. But I don't think, to state the complete obvious here, that anyone should take the president for his word. Because he has said this exact same thing over and over and over again for basically more than a month now.
And they're calling, they're saying, how do we make a deal? I said, you're being a little bit late. They want to negotiate, and as they should. So they called. I didn't call. They called. They want to make a deal. And the other side, I can tell you, they'd like to make a deal. They are negotiating, by the way, and they want to make a deal so badly, but they're afraid to say it. The reason they want to make a deal is they have been just beat to shit. They're begging to make a deal. They're begging to make a deal. They would like to be able to make a deal. I can't say any more than that. They'd like to make a deal very badly, very badly.
Now, maybe this time is different. We all should hope there's a deal. Maybe now Iran really does want to make a deal. Maybe Trump is negotiating with the secret Iranians in his mind. We don't know. But trusting him on this front is a little bit like Charlie Brown trusting Lucy with the football. I mean, at this point, if you believe him, that's kind of on you. But as obvious as this verbal tick of Trump's is, it also may have a very different purpose. You see, every time Trump claims Iran wants a deal, the stock market believes him. I mean, that clip I showed you of Trump saying the war was close to over and that Iran wanted to make a deal, that aired this morning on Fox Business, just before the markets opened. And like clockwork, the stock market jumped up. As one financial analyst told NBC News today, quote, as far as the stock market is concerned, the war is over until further notice. Well, thank you, stock market, I suppose, because that would certainly be news to the more than 50,000 American troops currently in the region. And unfortunately, it's just not the case. I mean, the reality is that Trump has never been a trustworthy news source here, obviously. Remember in the first days of this war, Trump said it would last 4 weeks max, maybe less. 4 weeks after saying that, Trump said it would be another 2 or 3 weeks. That was 2 weeks ago. And right now, the reality is that we are a week and a half through a 2-week ceasefire, and we just can't trust a word he says. We also can't necessarily trust the people who are negotiating on his behalf. Let me show you what I mean. I mean, today, in response to Trump's new blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran threatened to blockade more shipping lanes in the region, saying that unless Trump calls off his blockade, Iran will block all trade coming in and out of the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, and the Red Sea. that would cut the world off from even more of the global supplies of oil and fertilizer and would be a massive blow to the world economy. Blocking the Red Sea would include the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which alone accounts for about 12% of global oil shipments. And that's on top of, that's not even a part of the 20% that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. And it would be an especially huge blow to Saudi Arabia because, and we're seeing this really play out. I mean, for days now, we've been seeing reports that Saudi Arabia has been pushing the U.S. to drop Trump's blockade because they were afraid Iran would do this exact thing that they are threatening to do. And that lobbying effort, the idea that what Saudi Arabia wants and what Trump wants are two different things. That is particularly significant when you remember that one of the people leading negotiations with Iran right now is this guy.
What are the, I would say, things you have in your mind, in your body that you are using to be a deal maker in this very complex, I would say, field, which is peace?
Yeah, so I think peace is not that different than business.
Okay. That's, of course, Trump's son-in-law. You all know who he is, Jared Kushner. That was him 3 weeks ago, 28 days into Trump's war with Iran. And the event he was speaking at was a Saudi investment conference in Miami, Florida. It was hosted by none other than Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And even though Kushner is currently one of Trump's top negotiators with Iran, he was introduced at this Saudi investment event as a private citizen, as the founder and chief executive of his investment firm, Affinity Partners. You know, the investment firm of Kushner's that got a cool $2 billion from the Saudis after Trump's first term, that one. Now, the firm that the New York Times reports Kushner is actively trying to raise another $5 billion for from Gulf states like Saudi Arabia, while also leading negotiations with Iran, all happening same time. Now, I should note that in the months since the Times published that scoop, Kushner's firm has said that it does not intend to take in any additional capital while Jared is volunteering for the government. But the thing is, that commitment certainly doesn't exist once he leaves, and it certainly looks like he is lining up investments for when that day comes. Now, the obvious problem here is that Kushner has a clear conflict of interest. The White House insists that Kushner only acts in the best interest of the American people. But now one of his biggest benefactors, a country that has pumped literally billions of dollars into his company's coffers, a country that he's now asking to give him billions of dollars more, that country disagrees with Trump on how the U.S. should be negotiating with Iran. And Jared is one of the top negotiators. Today, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund announced its strategy for the next 4 years of investments. The fund says it plans to prioritize domestic investments inside Saudi Arabia, meaning maybe not investing as much in firms run by the son-in-laws of U.S. presidents. We'll see. But hey, maybe if Kushner plays his cards right, the Saudis will change their mind. Now, I should say that Kushner is adamant that his business life and his diplomatic life are two separate things. But it's impossible not to see the connections here. I mean, Jared isn't the only walking, talking conflict of interest on the U.S. side of these negotiations either. Today, the Financial Times reported that the Saudis may also be backing out of their American Golf League, LIV Golf. LIV Golf is, of course, the league that was a lifeline for Trump and his empire of golf courses after the PGA cut ties with Trump following January 6th. And while the White House has said that the president has no involvement in any business deals that would implicate his constitutional responsibilities as president, the Financial Times noted specifically that the Saudis have not fully made up their mind on whether they are ditching LIV Golf or not yet. They might stop funding the golf league that puts money in Trump's pockets. They might not. Either way, it's a signal that their largesse toward the Trump family, well, it might have limits. We'll see. Then there's Trump's other chief negotiator, former real estate developer Steve Witkoff. Right before Trump took office last year, an investment firm tied to the United Arab Emirates bought a $500 million stake in the cryptocurrency firm founded by Trump and Witkoff's families. Months later, a fund backed by the country made a $2 billion deal using the Trump and Witkoff family digital coins. Now, the White House has said that Witkoff does not participate in any official matters that could impact his financial interests. But could we get that map of the trade routes Iran is threatening to blockade up there on the screen again? Huh? That certainly seems like it would be bad for Saudi Arabia and the UAE. You can see that just by looking at the map. Good thing they have really good relationships with the key negotiators in charge. Now, Vance is there with them, but this is the U.S. delegation. This is the team we have entrusted the lives of more than 50,000 U.S. troops to. Yes, 2 real estate developers riddled with conflicts of interest, and J.D. Vance. And it has all been a reminder to me of what diplomacy and the team who leads it is supposed to be. I mean, remember the people who led the negotiations with Iran during the Iran negotiations back during the JCPOA negotiations were people like veteran diplomat Bill Burns, a man who had negotiated with Vladimir Putin when he was ambassador to Russia and with Gaddafi when he was a high-level Middle East envoy. People like Wendy Sherman, who already had the experience of negotiations with North Korea over their nuclear weapons program under President Clinton, before running point on issues ranging from China to Syria to eventually Iran during the Obama administration. And hundreds of experts who were pulled together from across the national security agencies of government, career and foreign service officials, who had spent decades working on issues that were relevant to the technical aspects of the negotiations. And now we have these guys, real estate developers with massive conflicts of interest. Now, as we look ahead to next Tuesday's deadline to extend the ceasefire, as we think about the fate of the more than 50,000 U.S. troops in the region, it's worth remembering that the negotiating team we have today is still primarily the team that got us into this mess in the first place, before a single missile had been fired in this war, before oil prices skyrocketed and U.S. troops lost their lives. Iran reportedly put a deal on the table with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, and they didn't take it. Witkoff himself said that 36 hours before the U.S. and Israel started bombing Iran, Iran presented the U.S. with a 7-page proposal for a potential nuclear deal. And according to reporting from The Guardian, Britain's national security advisor attended those final talks and believed that the deal offered by Iran was significant enough to prevent a rush to war. And now another diplomat, one from the Persian Gulf, told MS Now that the Iranians told Witkoff that they were willing to give up their highly enriched uranium. But for whatever reason, Kushner and Witkoff didn't take that deal. The White House denied that story, saying that Iran refused to negotiate seriously and that Trump was essentially forced to attack them to prevent an imminent nuclear threat. A threat that I should mention no credible expert believes Iran was anywhere close to achieving. So considering how plainly wrong the White House's justification is here, why did Kushner and Witkoff turn down by what by all accounts was a good deal? And the kind of deal that the White House seems to now desperately be trying to get. The kind of deal that Trump keeps saying Iran is so close to agreeing to. Well, former National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan thinks he knows what really happened here. So take a listen.
Just a few days before we started bombing Iran, the Iranians put a proposal on the table in Geneva that went a long way towards resolving the nuclear issue. And my understanding is that our side, our negotiators, simply didn't understand what they were being offered, and they ignored it and decided to go ahead and strike.
Our guys didn't understand. Was it in Farsi? What? I don't.